Okay, today our Zoom guest is Stephanie Longo. I've only met Stephanie once, but it was a very interesting and important event. I think it was at a historic association meeting or something, and uh, uh, we encouraged her to get involved in Italian American studies and to write books for Amazon. And lo and behold, she took my advice and she became a successful writer and journalist on the basis of that. And so I'm patting myself on the back right now for influencing Stephanie, getting her on the right path. I don't know where she would have, what she would have done, or what would have become of her if she hadn't met me.
It's true.
But I'm sure she would have done just fine. Uh, Stephanie has written several really important books about in the Arcadia series about northeastern Pennsylvania, and she has been involved in journalism and even in doing podcasts on Italian Americans. And she's got a slideshow she's going to show us, and we're very pleased to hear from Stephanie Longo.
Well, thank you so much, Dominic. First of all, everything that he said is completely true. I owe so much to Dominic, so I'm very moved and excited to be here today, because if it wasn't for that chance encounter, I seriously do not know where I would be today, because I am living my own Italian American dream. I'm the associate producer for the Italian American podcast as my day job. And then at night, I get to do all this amazing local history. So Dominic, you don't know what, what you caused for me in a wonderful, beautiful way. This is a dream come true for me. And to be here with you today, I just hope I make you proud. I hope that you enjoy this presentation because you influenced it.
When I think of how little money I have in the world, I think of your stories like yours, Stephanie. People I've touched here and there, not a lot, but clearly yours was one of the most dramatic. Since I only met you once.
I know. A chance meeting, but I mean, I feel like I've known you. Well, we have, because it's been almost 20 years since that chance meeting. And I mean, I still can't believe it. So just thank you for having me today. I'm so excited to talk to everybody about my favorite topic, which is the Italians of Northeastern Pennsylvania, specifically Lackawanna County. So
yeah, well, great. I'm interested to hear more about that.
All right, well, I am going to share my screen so this way you all can see the presentation. And we'll get this up.
Okay.
Come on. There we go.
I see it.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Now it's full screen.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk to you today about Italian festivals in Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania. So the reason why I like to tell the story of the Italian history of our area through the festivals is because, number one, we have what I like to call a festival season. And number two, each festival really demonstrates the history of the town that we're talking about. So just to give you all a little bit of an orientation, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania is the state's youngest county. It was our last county to be formed, and it is the home of the city of Scranton. So any of you who watch The Office, some of you might know the song 30,000 Pounds of Banana that has a Scranton reference, or the big one now is because our current president, Joe Biden, was actually born and raised in the Green Ridge section of Scranton. So not in one of the Italian sections I'm going to be telling you about today, but he actually borders one of the towns I will be telling you about, because the next town over from the street where he was born is actually Dunmore. So lots of amazing ethnic history in northeastern Pennsylvania. President Biden loves to tell people about his Irish history, and we have just as strong of an Italian history in Lackawanna County as well. So to give you all a little bit of an idea, here is the actual map of Lackawanna County, and you could see the city of Scranton there. You could see some of the other towns. Like I said, most of you probably have only heard of the city of Scranton unless you've actually been through here a few times. We are at a crossroads of several major interstates as well as the Pennsylvania Turnpike, so people have come through here without realizing it. But again, because I like everything to be Italian, I like to give the Italian map of Lackawanna County. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to start, of course, in the city of Scranton, because where else would we start? We're going to head to the town of JESSUP. We're going to head up to the other city of Lackawanna County that is called Carbondale. That's actually Lackawanna County's first city. When Scranton then became the preferred city, it actually overtook Carbondale as the county seat. But originally, Lackawanna County was formed around Carbondale. Then we're going to head to my hometown, which is Dunmore, and we're going to close out in the pizza capital of the world, which is Old Forge. And I want you to just kind of take a second and look at those stars, because those stars are really important. They kind of make like a little diagonal line across Lackawanna County. The reason why is because it corresponds to the coal veins. So see that dark brown line? That's the
Wow.
coal veins of Lackawanna County. And you go back to our Italian map, and there it is. The reason why is because when the immigrants came to Lackawanna County to settle, they had to settle in a place where they were able to get to the coal mines on foot. They couldn't afford the transportation. They couldn't afford to live on the outskirts, like say in a town like Clark Summit or Clark's Green or Moscow. They had to be where they were able to have easy access to the coal mines. So you'll see a lot of the heavier ethnic enclaves of Lackawanna County are formed around the coal veins. The Polish community settled in towns like Muzik and Troop, other Slavic communities as well, Lithuanian, Russian, Polish. They're all in that area where they were able to go by foot to the coal mines. So when you see that, just keep that in mind. So the very first place I'm going to take you is, of course, to the city of Scranton, and I'm going to take you to the very first Italian event that took place in the city of Scranton. Again, our county was formed in 1878. It was chopped off of neighboring Luzerne County. If you've heard of the city of Wilkes-Barre, that's actually where Planters Peanuts was founded by another Italian immigrant, but that's not what we're talking about today. However, just to give an idea of the proximity of everything and the heavy Italian heritage here. Lackawanna County, because there were so many immigrants coming to the city of Scranton, they had to chop it off, make another county out of it. So the very first celebration of Italian heritage in the city of Scranton and in Lackawanna County was our Columbus Day Festival. And that was in 1892. And really, our Columbus statue on Courthouse Square in Scranton is highly significant. It is one of the ones that was actually placed shortly after the 1891 New Orleans lynching as a response to it. And it also corresponded, of course, with Columbus's the anniversary of his arrival in the New World. So the Italian community of the city of Scranton got together and wanted to do something that was a really major celebration of Italian heritage and culture. At the time, the Italians of the area were really congregated a few streets over from where the monument is downtown. The Columbus Monument is on Courthouse Square. About 2 streets over is where the Italian colony was at that time. So they were able to walk over. And the really cool thing about this event, October 21st, 1892, is that it was open to all ethnicities. So the parade, based off of some of the newspaper reports, there were floats from the French community. There were floats from the Irish community, the Slovak community. Everybody got together to celebrate Columbus Day, but the inauguration was for the Columbus statue in honor of the Italians of the area. And you can see this is actually one of 2 surviving photos. They're the only 2 photos that actually exist of this, even though the newspaper, the Scranton Republican at the time, described it as the largest event the city of Scranton ever saw. Some of the numbers that I have seen have actually placed it higher than the annual St. Patrick's Day parade, which I know I'm talking to Chicago. I think you guys have number 1. We're number 3 on the largest St. Patrick's Day parades in the country. So our number for the inaugural Columbus Day event was larger than our largest St. Patrick's Day parade, which I think is mind-blowing because I've been to St. Patrick's Day. It's a little crazy. So think of all that. In fact, the city of Scranton thought that they would have to get the Scranton Fire Department out to open hoses, fire hoses on people, because they called it a surging mass of people. They didn't know what to do, and they thought it was a public safety hazard. And the police and the fire actually had to go on horseback to try to cut through the crowds that day. But I want to show you also, here's the second picture that is surviving. And if you see the short gentleman, like there's 3 gentlemen in the middle and there's a short man with a mustache. He is, in my opinion, probably the most important Italian American of Lackawanna County of that early era. His name is Frank Carlucci. He is related to the Senator Frank Carlucci as well. I think that he was his grandfather or great-grandfather. But this gentleman was a sculptor, and he actually was responsible for the grand staircase at Ellis Island. And he had a stone quarry in Forest City, Pennsylvania. So outside of Carbondale that I just showed you, Forest City is on the opposite side into Susquehanna County. And that's where all of his stone came through. So the stones that people walked on when they would actually cross through Ellis Island to come to the United States were actually from Northeastern Pennsylvania, which I think is a really amazing thing to say. But Mr. Carlucci actually constructed the Columbus statue in his front yard on Madison Avenue in Scranton. And it's in the section of, I live in Dunmore, but the next street over is the section of Scranton where he lives. So I'm constantly there. And I drive down that street and I think to myself, I can't imagine this massive statue being built in someone's front yard, because the report said that there would be an arm, there would be a head, there would be the chest. It pretty interesting if you're going by back in those days to see these random pieces there. But Mr. Carlucci himself was the person behind getting this statue. He was very big in the Italian community here. He worked tirelessly with the government of Italy to try to do whatever he could to make sure that the Italians of our area were protected. And through some of his advocacy, we even had an honorary consulate in this area. Fortunato Tiscar was the man's name, and it was actually like a satellite of the Philadelphia consulate for a long time in this area, and that was because of the heavy Italian population here. And Frank Carlucci is the guy that you thank for that. So definitely a really cool story. And here it is itself. This is our Columbus Monument. That is all Mr. Carlucci's work. It is a protected monument for the city of Scranton as well as Lackawanna County. I know that there's been, especially for you in Chicago, a lot going on with Columbus statues, but I can tell you here, I've had it from the majority and minority county commissioners that this statue is protected. There's cameras on it, and they're just trying to make sure that it is treated carefully because it was a gift from the Italian community, and they don't want to do anything to this statue that would offend the Italian community. So they're working to try to maybe have some interpretive signs or something that's going on, but they don't want to take it down because they refuse to offend the Italian community, because the Italian community did so much to build the city of Scranton today. So they're trying to find a positive way to make everybody happy is what's going on in our city. So that is the story of our first Italian Heritage Celebration in the city of Scranton.
Very good.
The very next place I'm going to take you is my personal favorite, and don't tell anybody that because I'm from Dunmore. I shouldn't be saying this. It should be the Dunmore Feast, but actually this is my favorite. This is Sant'Ubaldo in JESSUP, and this photo is from 1915, and it's one of the first instances of the La Corsa dei Ceri here in JESSUP, Pennsylvania. So the immigrants from JESSUP came from a town called Gubbio in Umbria, and St. Ubaldo is their patron saint. And legend states that upon return from negotiations with Frederick I Barbarossa, St. Ubaldo was placed upon a platform and paraded through Gubbio so the townspeople knew that he was safe. So this manifestation that you see in La Corsa dei Ceri actually comes from that original parading around the town of Gubbio. And it's really, it's Memorial Day weekend, and unfortunately due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's not being held again this year. It is a sight to see. If you ever do get out here for an event, definitely come and see it. But this is one of the ones in 1915, and you can see it's very rudimentary. You can see that rickety fence in the background, and that is actually the main drag. It's called Church Street now in JESSUP, but it doesn't look very much like a main drag in this photo, but you'll see in some next ones. I'll even point it out. Here it is in 1920, and you can kind of see it just evolving a little bit more. The street is a little more paved. Things are a little bit better, but this is, again, the Italian immigrants coming, making sure that they're celebrating their saint. And I'll explain who everybody is when you see a color photo, because it'll make a little bit more sense. But these men that you see are called the Ceraioli. and it means the carriers of the Cielo. So that platform with the statues of the saints that you see is called a Cielo. And that's a test of strength. If they drop it, it's what we call a brutta figura. So you're seeing that. It stopped for a little bit because of the Korean War. And the reason why is because they didn't have enough of men to run with the saints. So it stopped up until 1976. 1976 is a key year for the town of JESSUP because not only was it the United States bicentennial, it was JESSUP's centennial. And they wanted to do something special. And a lot of the older generations in JESSUP remembered that they had La Corsa dei Ceri back in the day when their parents were younger. And they heard stories, or some of them even remembered actually attending it. And they decided to get this back. So they had like a diplomatic envoy of townspeople go over to Gubbio and work with people in Gubbio to see how they could replicate this event in the United States. And today, JESSUP and Gubbio are the only two places that have this event. So if you can't see it in Gubbio, you'll see it the next week in JESSUP. And here's a good image that actually shows you everything so you can get an idea. So each group is considered a family. And the middle one that you see in the color yellow, they are the ones who carry Saint Ubaldo. And Saint Ubaldo for the town of Gubbio represents the stonemasons. Then you see the blue group, that is the family of Saint George, and he represents tradesmen and merchants. And then the black is for St. Anthony, and he represents peasants and laborers. And what you're seeing in this picture is actually what they call the alzata, which is the raising of the Cielo. And these men that you see up on top are the capo dieci. So there's 10 ceraioli that can carry the statue. So capo dieci would be the head of 10. And once they're up there, they receive this beautifully hand-painted picture that's called a brocca. And for good luck, they throw the brocca off the top. And then somebody gets a piece of it. So this way they have that as a remembrance of when they were the capo dieci. It is the most significant thing that could happen to a young man in JESSUP to be nominated the capo dieci for his saint family. And every Italian family in JESSUP, no matter who you talk to, they belong to one of these saint families. It's pretty cool. They wanted me to join the St. Ubaldo Society. And I said, but I'm friends with people in each family. I don't want to pick. That would be awful. So even for this year, because the event can't take place, they've been asking people to hang out the flags in honor of their saint families. So I bought one that has all 3 flags because I refuse to pick between them all because they've all been such amazing supporters of my research. I can't pick one of the families. I love them all equally. So you just really see how it ends up becoming that little competition. It's friendly competition. Nobody hates everybody else. St. Ubaldo always wins La Corsa dei Ceri, and I say wins in quotation marks. It's a wonderful event that really shows off the Italian pride in the town of JESSUP. And what you're seeing here, that's Church Street. So remember that first photo that I showed you from 1915? This is that street today. So St. Ubaldo is now coming down that street. That particular St. Ubaldo statue is not one that is paraded in the actual running. This is one that goes through the town just to invoke St. Ubaldo's blessing on everybody. And it's housed in the St. Ubaldo Cultural Society's building in JESSUP. But that was actually given to the town of JESSUP by the town of Gubbio in recognition of the fact that they've really worked so hard to maintain this tradition. The entire event even has a children's race of the saints, so this way children can learn how to participate with it. It's really by far one of the most well-done Italian-American observances in our area because they spend so much time focusing on the tradition. One of my friends that lives in JESSUP said to me, if it's not done in Gubbio, we don't do it. And they will actually have Zoom calls with people in Gubbio to make 100% sure that what they're doing fits the Gubbio manifestation of this event. So it's really a well done, fantastic observance. If you could get out here for it, I strongly recommend it. Like I said, they're not doing it again this year, but they do have some events planned on Memorial Day weekend in JESSUP just to keep the town going, and some virtual things that they did. Last year, they had one of the local choirs sing some of the Italian songs via Zoom, of course, and they did some ceremonial wreath layings at the cemetery, as well as going around with the relic. The priest would go through the town and bless people with it. So they're going to do something, but it's not this that I'm telling you about That's coming back, God willing, next year. So now I'm taking you back to the city of Scranton because it's like all roads lead to Rome, all roads lead to Scranton when you're in Lackawanna County. It just is what it is. And this is actually Father's Day weekend. And this event is in honor of La Madonna della Buddha. And she is the patroness of San Mango d'Aquino in Calabria. And the city of Scranton has a large Calabrese community in the section that's called Bull's Head. So before, during the introductions, I was telling you a little bit about where Joe Biden is from. He's from Green Ridge. So going deeper into the city of Scranton, Green Ridge actually pushes into Bull's Head. So if you're leaving Green Ridge, you hit Bull's Head. My grandfather actually had a barbershop in Bull's Head, and a lot of his patrons came from Calabria. It was the Calabrese section, and the people from San Mango d'Aquino even opened up a mutual aid society right on Providence Road, and you can still see the building to this day. But this is the manifestation that they have. It's a closed event, so if you're not part of the San Mango d'Aquino Society, you can't attend it. And it's held on Father's Day weekend at McDade Park, so one of the county's major parks.
The
Yes.
Calabrese, I assume, were coal miners.
If you were not a coal miner, you either worked for the rails or a stonemason. They were the three main industries that we had out here. My great-grandfather that came from Calabria actually became a shoemaker over here. That was his job because he had a brother that was a shoemaker that had come over and he found work. So he learned from his brother. But my great-grandfather from Campania, Guardia Lombardi, which I'll get to Guardia in a few minutes, he was actually a stonemason who worked outside of the coal mines, which very, very lucky that he never went into the mines because you hear so many stories of what happened in them. But this for La Madonna della Buddha is actually, McDade Park has the Lackawanna County Coal Mine Tour. So behind where this picture was taken is an old coal breaker, and the county redid everything so this way you could actually go down into a mine and see what it was like. And it's pretty scary. I hate to say it, it's a nice place to go on a really hot, humid day. Like if you want to go on the coal mine tour, that's a really good day to do it because it's freezing down there. But it's also really scary, and God bless these men for doing that. They really built our area. We have so much to thank because of them coming. And everybody that came, regardless of their ethnicity, most of them worked in the coal mines. You could even see at the tour before you go into it, some of the signage that's all in the different languages of the immigrants that came to our area. But La Madonna della Buddha, they had that mutual aid society because, unfortunately, if somebody was killed in the mines, the mine bosses didn't care. They would just bring your body and drop you on the front porch of your house and leave your wife to take care of it. Here, the mutual aid society gathered together and helped each Italian family out to make sure that they were able to afford a proper burial and to make sure that the families were taken care of. So that's La Madonna della Buddha. The next place I'm going to take you is up to Carbondale. So again, Carbondale is Lackawanna County's second city. It's the oldest city in Lackawanna County. And this is for Our Lady of Mount Carmel, the celebration that they have. It's every July. It's mid-July, so after the 4th of July festivities is when it's had. A lot of our feasts out here don't correspond 100% to the actual saint feast day. It's usually the closest weekend, and it could be the weekend before or the weekend after, depending on when places get the opportunity to do it. So the Our Lady of Mount Carmel feast has gone on for more than 100 years in this area, and it's a church picnic. It's a very beautiful event. The people in Carbondale are very tied to Our Lady of Mount Carmel. I remember I gave a presentation once for the Carbondale Public Library, and I met this wonderful older gentleman, and his name was Patrick, and he showed me where the original Our Lady of Mount Carmel church was. It's on someone's property in Carbondale, like you're winding and back roads, and you think you're going to fall off the edge of the earth because you're like almost into the countryside when you're riding around. And Patrick and some of the gentlemen from Our Lady of Mount Carmel were able to talk to the owners of the house that is now on the property of where this old church was, and they were able to build a plaque. And it just recognizes this beautiful Italian parish that was built there. And now this festival steps off where that plaque is.
One of the biggest festivals in the Chicago area is the Feast of Mount Carmel that takes place in Melrose Park, and it's
Oh,
been going
wow.
for well over 100 years, and is over 120 years, they say.
It's
So,
amazing. You know, I feel like every single one of these feasts, it's so vitally important to keep it going, because the history of wherever you're talking about is in that feast. You know, the people in Carbondale are really tied to this. Again, they had the same situation as JESSUP. So because of World War II and the Korean War, it stopped for a little bit, then it picked back up in the 1970s. And from what I understand, there was a greased pig and a greased pole contest in the 1970s to the 1980s. And they stopped because clearly, like, you don't want to be running, like trying to climb up a greased pole or going to catch a greased up pig. But it's a really cool event. And you can see right here, the gentleman, oops, I am sorry. The gentlemen of the parish actually bring the Blessed Mother back while the women run ahead to clean the church and prepare for her. And you can see the dollar bills. So in the era of immigration, $1 was the equivalent of what $25 would be today. So you really get an idea of just how important it was for people to make these sacrifices and how important their faith was to them. And it's something that's lasted, and it's a beautiful event. It's one of the feasts that I like a lot too. They do a lot of homemade foods. Everything is very homey there. It's nothing catered in. Everybody in the parish volunteers to get together to do things. The next one I'm going to show you is actually my hometown, both of my hometowns, because my hometown is of Dunmore, but it's also of Guardia Lombardi in Italy. So my grandfather was born there. So we've got both of my major towns in this feast. And that is the Feast of San Rocco, St. Rocco. And this is a picture from the 1990s. This is in the Bunker Hill section of Dunmore. And I actually live on the outskirts of that section, not quite in Bunker Hill proper, but this is where all the Guardias went when Bunker Hill got filled up. All my neighbors are Guardias. So it's still a heavy Italian neighborhood to this day. And this was not by design. I did not choose to live here, but I found the perfect house in the perfect neighborhood. So it all worked out. But this festival is over 100 years old, and the statues go over a 1.5-mile trek. And because Bunker Hill is split a little bit between the city of Scranton, where it becomes Petersburg, and Bunker Hill, Dunmore, it crosses both of them. So while they're walking, they're either in Scranton or in Dunmore, but the parish is in Dunmore, so it's considered Dunmore's Italian feast. So the Guardias community in the United States venerates St. Rocco because in 1656, our town was having a major plague, and the plague ended up killing 1,100 of our town's 1,475 residents. And I always say, thank God Longo survived, or else I would not be here to be giving this presentation. But through St. Rocco's intercession, he really saved our town. He is not the patron saint of Guardia Lombardi, that is San Leone, but he is considered Guardia Lombardi's protector. So he's venerated a little bit differently. There's even a local legend. There used to be a chapel in honor of St. Rocco as you ascended the hill to get into Guardia. And when that chapel had to be torn down, the town's population started rapidly dwindling. And they say because they threw St. Rocco out of his church, Guardia was never the same. So the Guardias have a very strong devotion to St. Rocco. And interestingly enough, when you're in Bunker Hill, it's the topography, everything is so similar to Guardia. If you're riding around before a long day or after a long day, I'm not a morning person. So if I'm doing this first thing in the morning, I have to remind myself that I'm in Bunker Hill and not in Guardia because some of the places are so similar.
Yeah, well, Italians in Pennsylvania must have felt at home because of all the mountains and the hills in Pennsylvania. And they, on the other hand, for Chicago, which is totally flat, they were disoriented. And one of the books that we did about Italian American women was subtitled Madonna Mia, qui devo vivere? You mean we have to live here? And so it was probably an easier transition as far as the topography was concerned.
It's really true because I have not had the fortune of going up to Gubbio yet, but my friends that have said that JESSUP is like a carbon copy of Gubbio and Dunmore is a carbon copy of Guardia. And it's just it's shocking sometimes. Like when my mother and I went to Guardia for the first time, we were just in a state of shock over how similar it was. Like I felt right at home. I was like, this is great. Even in the church here, I mean, you could see a picture of the inside of the church. This actually used to be a Presbyterian church before the Italian community raised the funds to buy it. But you can see the ornate stained glass over there on the side. I mean, that's an Italian thing right there. And these are our statues. And you can see St. Rocco in the middle. This comes from the 1990s. But again, just all the veneration that has been done for it. But an interesting thing that happened, so the Diocese of Scranton in about 2010, went through a major parish restructuring program. And the Diocese of Scranton linked is the best way to describe it. The parish of St. Anthony, which is also an Italian parish in Dunmore, with the parish of St. Rocco. And the people of St. Anthony's parish are traditionally from the town of Calitri in Campania. So Guardia Lombardi and Calitri are about 10 minutes apart. And I've been to both. And the funny thing is, when my mother and I went to the celebration where the two parishes were linked, the Campanilismo was alive and well in Dunmore, even though you wouldn't think that, because we heard one of these Calitran families say, we don't want the Guardiers in our church. And my mother and I were just shocked to even hear something like that. But because they wanted to really show the linkage of the two churches, they added St. Anthony to the St. Rocco's procession. And now it is a carbon copy of Guardia. Before, without St. Anthony, it was not a carbon copy of Guardia. So it's kind of interesting how sometimes it gets lost in translation, where JESSUP was so, this has to be exactly how they do it in Gubbio. In Bunker Hill, it was more of, well, we're going to pick and choose what we want to do. We're going to add this. Maybe we'll take this out. And now it's a carbon copy. But for years, when my mother was growing up, it was not a carbon copy of what you saw in Guardia. But you could see right here, after the procession, people get blessed by the relic of St. Rocco. And he protects against diseases of the mind and body. So of course, he's been a saint that we've all been praying to a lot during the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, this feast hasn't taken place because of the pandemic. But after the procession, this relic is available for veneration inside St. Rocco's Church as well. But he is so important to the Guardiers. He's also very important to the Irpinian community in the United States. I have a blog where I write exclusively about Irpinia, and I wrote a blog, and there were no less than, I think, like 25 to 30 towns in Irpinia that have some sort of a veneration to St. Rocco. So he's very important to our section of Italy. The next event I'm going to tell you about is, guess what? Back in the city of Scranton, because again, that's all that we do is bounce back and forth. And this is called La Festa Italiana, and this is held on Labor Day weekend. And I'd like to call your attention to the old-fashioned root beer and red birch beer sign. And what do you see underneath that? You see deep-fried pierogies for sale at the Italian festival. And a lot of people that I know out here do not like La Festa Italiana for this reason. And I'm of the opposing viewpoint. I say, if there's one thing that celebrates who we are as an Italian American community in Northeastern Pennsylvania, it is the fact that we want everybody to feel included in our festival. So the fact that we have Polish food in our festival, that to me is totally fine. The root beer and red birch beer, that's totally a Pennsylvania thing. So, you're going to see some of that. But the pierogies, we want people to experience our culture, and we want to experience their cultures as well. And we want people to just come and celebrate being Italian and celebrating all things that are Italian. And you don't have to be Italian to be a vendor at this event. And I think that's really special because it showcases just how much our culture has influenced other cultures and how much other cultures have influenced ours. So I just love that. That is Courthouse Square. That is actually right by, a slightly off in this photo would be the Columbus statue. That's actually at the intersection where he is found. And you can see you get some traditional music that takes place there. Lots of Italian American musicians come to the city of Scranton, so this way they could perform, because this is one of the largest Italian events at least in the state of Pennsylvania, it's definitely one of the largest. It makes me think of that original Columbus Day event because it is a surging mass of people. I don't like going down there for that reason because it is packed on some days, but it's a really great event and it's definitely worth stopping by. And you can see you get to try the pizza in our area. That's Buona Pizza, one of the local pizzerias. All sorts of different Italian foods are available there.
It
And you
looks
get your
like
Italian out.
that thin crust.
So we have so many different types of pizza in northeastern Pennsylvania. The next town I'm going to be talking about is Old Forge, which is considered the pizza capital of the world. Their pizza looks like a Sicilian pizza. The thin crust is popular in the city of Scranton, some places in Dunmore. I love going down to Luzerne County for a pan-fried pizza. I will take pan-fried pizza any day of the week. I love it. It's like a Detroit, but like fried even more. It's a calorie bomb, but I love it. If you check out, it's called NEPAPizzaReview.com. The guy that runs it is a good friend of mine. He talks about every type of pizza that you can find in northeastern Pennsylvania. No two pizzerias are alike. So this one is our New York style, but the one in Old Forge is like a classic one for this area, pan fried. It's crazy. We have our own pizza culture here. I know you have Chicago deep dish.
Okay.
We even have Italian novelties that are available. I have my Kiss Me I'm Italian pin that looks exactly like that my mother bought me when I was 5 years old at my first Italian festival. So I still have mine to this day. So like it's just one of those events that generations get to go to. And our final stop on our Italian tour of Lackawanna County is the pizza capital of the world, Old Forge. And I know a lot of friends from Naples don't like it when I say that because they feel they're the pizza capital of the world. The borough of Old Forge has actually trademarked the name pizza capital of the world. So a little bit of pizza wars there for you. And if you ever do come out to this area, Arcaro and Janelle's is the place to go. But the people from Old Forge come from the town of Felito in Campania in the Cilento. So Guardia Lombardi is in Irpinia. Cilento is a little bit closer to the coastline. And the Felites have this event. It's actually the week after Labor Day weekend. So they actually close out the Italian feast season in Lackawanna County. And they celebrate Our Lady of Constantinople. The people of Felito have been celebrating her since the 1770s. And the people that came to Old Forge brought that veneration with them because Our Lady of Constantinople helped their families through rough times. And this to me is like one of the most homey of the festivals that there are because they try to keep it as traditional as possible. But as you see in this picture, they're all kids. Like the kids really get center stage in this. And I love it because I think that we need to do what we can to get the Italian American youth involved. This festival does it in such a perfect way. So they build the floats. This one that you see is actually supposed to represent one of the ships that the immigrants came over on. And you can see all that they are doing there. And you can see this one again, this feast as well. You can see Our Lady of Constantinople. She's headed to her chapel in this, and that's actually a rosary that those girls made, they're carrying. But this feast, much like the other ones, stopped for a period of time, was brought back, and it's really become Old Forge's keystone event. Even the pizzerias in Old Forge, everybody gets together and really does what they can to celebrate that. The Felites Association built a chapel where Our Lady of Constantinople is taken to after a mass that's held at Our Lady of Grace, now Prince of Peace, after that parish restructuring parish. And you can see they're just leaving the church there. That basket that those girls are carrying is with carnations that are in blue. And during the mass that they have in honor of Our Lady of Constantinople, the children of the parish are given a carnation and they have the opportunity to pin a prayer to it. And it's a prayer for their families, and they drop it in the basket. And then the carnations are then taken to be placed at the Blessed Virgin Mary's feet at the chapel. So I always think that's cool. And in this photo, you see the Rinaldi boys. One of the major pizzerias in Old Forge is Cafe Rinaldi. But I wanted to make sure I showed this picture, number one, because you really get a good view of Our Lady of Constantinople. And number two, because you get to see those sashes that they're wearing. So every child in the town has the opportunity to wear a sash with either their family's name or their immigrant ancestor's name on it. And it's the town's way of bringing the old into the new. So the children are the new, the old would be the family name, and they're carrying that proudly for more generations, just as a sign of respect. It's a 3-day festival. It's the last of the season for us, for our feasts in the area, but truly, I like going there because they really do whatever they can. It's a family feast where you might go to La Festa Italiana and it's more like a hangout with your friends or something like that. This is more of a family event, and it's just a really awesome one.
Yes.
So you made a nice little tour of Lackawanna County. You started in JESSUP with St. Ubaldo. You went to the city of Scranton with La Madonna della Buddha, as well as La Festa Italiana. You went up to Carbondale with Our Lady of Mount Carmel. You stopped by my hometown, Dunmore, with St. Rocco, and you ended your feast experience in Old Forge with the Felates Festival.
Oh, very well
Yeah.
done. Very well
Yeah.
done.
And this is how you guys can reach out to me if any of you are interested in staying in touch. I love talking to people, especially if you have other information about the area or anything that you ever like to share. I'm always interested in talking to people about Italian heritage and culture. So I'm going to stop the share now.
Okay, the big question about feasts that was in my mind for a long time is coming to a new country that was predominantly Protestant and recreating these festivals with saints, say statues and money on the pinned to them. It seemed like paganism. It would have seemed, and it did seem like paganism, I think, to the Protestants in America, and even to the Irish leaders of the Catholic Church at that time, and to even some of the priests were a little bit upset with that. But why did they continue this tradition that was so non-American in your mind?
I feel like out here, we all have such a strong tie to our respective ethnicities. Northeastern Pennsylvania to me is that representative of, I hate to use the term, but the melting pot of the United States. We are the quote unquote Vatican for the Polish National Catholic Church. We have the Lithuanian National Catholic Church here. We have one of the nation's largest St. Patrick's Day parades. So we have so much going on ethnically here that I feel that the Italian community wanted to do something where they said, hey, we are just as important of an ethnicity as all these other ethnic groups. Let's share a little bit of our culture. It's really the vibe that you get when you go to any one of these events, and you get that specific town vibe. You know, yes, we all consider ourselves Italian American, but if you talk to somebody from JESSUP, they're going to say to you that they're Eugubini first before they say they're Italian American. I've had the instances, and I'm trying to train myself more because I'm learning more about my Calabrese side. But because my grandfather was so proud of being from Guardia, my first thing is I always say, oh, I'm Guardiese. I said, well, no, I'm Guardiese and Calabrese now. Like, I really want to make sure I pay respect to that side as well. But it's just how things have been handed down in the families out here. There's a lot of that campanilismo in northeastern Pennsylvania, just based off of where people's families are from, that they don't realize.
So yeah, I eventually came to the conclusion that the feast days were the happiest days of the year in the little town in Italy. There was plenty of food, excitement, music, pageantry, everything. And so when someone in America suggested, hey, we should start up a festival like we had there, everyone had their ears wide open. They wanted to do it. It suggested something, maybe one of the few good things about being in Italy in the situation that they were. And then obviously it's a sense of where we want our share. We want our day to have a parade if everybody else is going to have one too. So it's a part of ethnic identity, but also it's not the national Italian identity, except in the larger festivals that are not focused on the local patron saint. We've got some interesting folks out there, and I'm asking now for anyone who wants to make a contribution or a question or a comment. Who's out there? I see a few.
Yes, Stephanie, can I ask you a
Hi.
question?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, your presentation was so nice and you're so enthusiastic about your Italian identity that it captures all of us. I work in Rome, but I'm from Campania, and I also worked in Calabria. Felito's not too far from where I live. My question is about the younger generations. In your photos, there are plenty of young people. Now, how do you manage as an Italian community to keep the younger generations attached to tradition? Whereas, we know very well that they can be attracted towards other forms of culture, more within the Americanization process. How do you manage there
So
to keep the younger generations, close to the Italian American identity, to the Italianicity?
I think that it really comes down to how you're raised. In my case, my parents, I'm a child of divorce. My father was actually Lithuanian and my mother is the Italian American. And when I was 21, I legally took her last name. So that's how I'm a Longo. But I was raised Italian, and it was, this is where your grandfather came from. This is where your family came from. This is what you should be proud of. And I never knew my grandfather. He died 8 years before I was born. So all of these stories, by her passing them down to me, I learned to know who my grandfather was. I learned all of that. And I hear very similar stories when I'm talking to my friends in this area. We're all of that younger adult generation. I'm 40. One of my other close friends is like 38, and we're all like in the same age bracket here. And we all have similar experiences where it really came down from our parents, and our parents were either the children or the grandchildren of these immigrants, and they were taught to be proud of it. And you grow up realizing this is who I am, this is my culture, this is a part of me. And I'm more at home at any of these Italian feasts than I am for some of the non-Italian things. I've tried to learn a little bit of Lithuanian things just because I felt bad, like that I didn't know any of it, but I'm not as drawn to it as I am the Italian things. I was an Italian major in college. Like I just love every aspect of this culture. And I think that's one thing that this area does very well. Italian is still taught in some of the schools in this area. The school district where JESSUP is has a full Italian program. All of our local colleges and universities have Italian. It's a viable part of this community and it's thriving. And I think it's through our parents teaching us. And now when we get to be parents ourselves, we're the ones who are going to be teaching the next generation. So.
Okay, let's move on to Lou Corsino. Lou.
Thank you. Stephanie, it seems that we have a lot in common. I'm half Lithuanian and half Italian too. My mother was Lithuanian. Also, I saw in your bio that you have relatives in Lamezia Terme, and that's where my relatives are from too. And I visited.
Oh, that's awesome.
We should connect. I wanted to ask you though. Maybe this is Maria's question too. That in your wonderful presentation, I get the feeling that there's a lot of residential Italians, and there's Italians are see each other every day, and you moved into an Italian neighborhood. That is unusual, I think, in the Chicago area. That there might be Italian Fest in which Italians from a wide variety of areas come to, but it's hard to find a concentrated section of Italians, even in Little Italy's in Chicago. So I'm wondering, maybe again, this is Maria's issue about the young people still Italian. Has this something to do with the fact that Northeastern Pennsylvania is not as urban like Chicago would be? Is it because of the hills and mountains? I'm wondering how you maintain that how that area has maintained its sort of Italianness when, and I don't think that's as evident in the Chicago area. That makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I'm just going to share a joke with you. They say that if you ever want to make sure that you are saved from the apocalypse, come to Scranton because it'll happen 20 years after the fact. So that's part of it.
I got it.
We are very old school out here. A lot of the towns in this area still have their heavy ethnic identities. The neighboring town to us, it's called Troop, T-H-R-O-O-P. They have a Slavic, Polish, Eastern European community, and it's the same thing. Like it's just where you live. Dixon City is another one of Scranton suburbs. That's where all the Polish people live. So I don't necessarily think that we do it on purpose. I think that it just happens, and I'm glad for that. Dunmore itself, so in the 2014 American Community Survey, Dunmore was actually number 12 of the top 20 most Italian towns in the United States, and
Wow.
Old Forge, I believe, was 17. So we don't tend to move out of our Italian communities out here, which is a pretty amazing thing. When my mother and I were looking, so we bought this house in 2014. She grew up in Dunmore, and her first thing was, I need to move back to Dunmore. And the real estate agent said, you're going to have a hard time because places just don't go up for sale in Dunmore. And she was like, no, I want to live back in Dunmore. And it just so happened the first place in Dunmore that we looked, it's in the Guardia section, and it was exactly what we were looking for. But the past owners were actually Guardias as well. So, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of people who just don't leave their neighborhoods, or they're going to sell to people of the same ethnic background. I mean, here in Dunmore, Guardias sold to Guardias. It wasn't even Italian selling to Italian. It went to the town level.
I don't think that's replicated in Chicago as easily. Interesting.
Yeah. But you guys are a much bigger city, and a lot more exciting things happen there. And you're ahead of us so much in the times. I mean, we're lucky that we have internet out here sometimes, I like to say. Like, that's one of the things that's actually on the county commissioner's agenda, is to get all of Lackawanna County fully connected to the internet with higher speeds. So urbanization, different things like that.
Okay, Professor Carla Sibonini, I bet you have a question.
Oh, well, more of a comment. I just wanted to thank Stephanie. What a wonderful presentation. How well organized, and I loved it. It's so fascinating to see what was going on with all the different festivals and whatnot. And I too was really impressed with the number of young people that are engaged in that as well. I just was wondering a little bit about what the engagement, some of them that are the patron saints of the official church with those festivals, because Robert Orsi, you might have read his work, The Madonna of 115th Street. He talks about the evolution of that particular procession in New York City, how important it was as a sense of belonging, like the Madonna blessed this area and brought them providence and they lived there, and that the procession was actually marking off their belonging in that neighborhood. And he looks at it historically over time, how as the official church got involved with it and sanctioning it as a ritual, a rite, a festivity, that they tried to damp down on some of the more paganistic, for lack of a better word, aspects of it, such as the pinning of the bills and things like that. And so the official church's involvement actually sort of de-ethnicized it a certain, if that's a word. Is there any, so what is the relationship between like the St. Rocco and those with the official parish, and how is it, promoted and established?
So again, our area is, I feel like we're an anomaly. Every time I talk to somebody that's outside of Northeastern Pennsylvania, I feel like we're this anomaly of ethnic enclaves because things are so different out here. But in the Diocese of Scranton, we actually have traditionally ethnic parishes. So St. Rocco is traditionally an ethnic Italian parish. You're only going to get an Italian priest in that parish. The same thing with St. Lucy's. That's the Mother Italian Church of the Diocese of Scranton. You're only going to get an Italian American priest there. And fortunately, we have enough of vocations in our diocese where that's able to still take place. With St. Ubaldo, actually, for that event. So when the Diocese of Scranton went through its restructuring, there was major drama, unfortunately. St. Rocco's, all that, everybody mostly got to keep everything the way that it was supposed to. Old Forge, Our Lady of Grace got merged with another parish that was nearby. It became Prince of Peace, but it's still Our Lady of Grace Church of Prince of Peace Parish. But the Diocese of Scranton chose to close St. Mary's in JESSUP, and it was St. Mary's of the Assumption, and that was where the actual Mass in honor of St. Ubaldo would take place. That was the Italian church. They kept the Polish church in JESSUP because JESSUP also has a little bit of a Polish population, and they closed the Italian church. And every Italian American in our area was like, what are they thinking with St. Ubaldo? Why are they doing this? And the people of JESSUP took it as far as the Vatican to protest that. I remember several friends telling me that it would be best if I didn't open up that can of worms in any of my books, because it's still a very strong wound in the town, because the Vatican sided with the diocese and the church did close. It was sold off. I think it's a yoga studio now.
Oh gosh.
It's some of what has happened to some of these old churches in our diocese makes you so sick. I used to cantor at Mass when I was younger, and one of the most beautiful churches, it was a German church in West Scranton, which is heavily Italian, but there were also like Welsh and Germans that lived there. And it was called St. John the Baptist, and they tore it down and put a bank there. And that had like some of the most beautiful stained glass that you would ever see. And that's all gotten lost. So the diocesan restructuring that happened in 2010, it's got some really bad wounds still to this day. Mm-hmm. And St. Mary's of the Assumption in JESSUP in the Italian community is probably the worst one. Everybody else really got saved. St. Lucy's got linked up with St. Peter and Paul, that's a Polish one, and they have their priest, and St. Lucy's has their Italian priest. Everybody's happy. Same thing going on with all the other Italian ones, but JESSUP, which I'm shocked because it's like the standard bearer for Italian feasts in this region, theirs did get closed, and they took that all the way to the Vatican.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you for that answer. Wow, that's a fascinating history.
Oh, I know. You could study this stuff just in the churches of our area for weeks on end.
That sense of belonging, that this is our place, so in the early history, the Italians weren't often welcomed into the parishes that were controlled by the Irish clergy. And taking the money, as you meant, those dollars meant a lot, that was a big contribution. And building your own house of worship was such a strong symbolic act of, this, we're creating our own house of worship if you're not going to welcome us into yours. So how important those parishes are. So thank you.
We got lucky. If you ever get a chance to, and I know the Italian American podcast, they came out to visit me for Greetings for Italian America episode in Scranton, and St. Lucy's is on there. So the Diocese of Scranton, because there were so many Italians in that Italian colony that I mentioned, mm-hmm. they realized that they needed to have an Italian church because they couldn't fit them in St. Peter's Cathedral, and that's traditionally Irish. So they ended up building St. Lucy's, and that's how that became the Mother Italian Church of the Diocese of Scranton, because they had no more room in the church to fit everybody, so they moved the Italians to their own. But that's one of the instances where the Italians didn't fund it. The diocese actually did, and then the Italians mm-hmm. helped build it from there.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dominic had to step away for a minute, but I'm Jeanette, and I work at the library, and I'm working here today, but I heard you were talking about Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I want you to know that my mother's oldest sister married a man from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and he came to Chicago, and they worked at the local Sherwin-Williams paint company and whatever, his sister, but he was from Gubbio, and I was in Gubbio.
I love it.
So I said that some of the people from your town actually came, and I believe he said JESSUP was the town they were from in Pennsylvania, outside of Scranton. So, but he was not a miner type. He came here and eventually opened a lunch counter and a little grocery store, Italian grocery store. So, yes, it's a small world, isn't it? When I saw that you were going to talk about Scranton and the people who were from, I said, oh, that's my Uncle Mario's town. So I just wanted to say hello and say
this
come
is great.
from a distance, and they came on the train, and he was here. He spent his whole life here with my aunt. So it was quite an interesting, he always had stories to tell.
Well, I just love the fact that I could tell that you have some sort of a relationship with it because you're pronouncing it Scranton like we do. Every time that I try to go someplace, I pronounce it Scranton. I feel like I'm like messing something up, like the local accent is Scranton. And I always listen for that when President Biden is speaking, because I'm like, yep, you are from here. That's the dead giveaway is how he pronounces it.
So I want to thank you. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
It is very. Mary Maturi Gibson, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Hi, Mary.
Okay, hi. I really enjoyed your presentation, especially focusing in on the saints, because the saints are extremely important to Italians. My parents came from Sicily, and you know how poor Italy was and how if Sicily was even poorer, those saints were extremely important. Saints, if you read anything about the saints, they were common, ordinary people who did extraordinary things. So Italians pray to those saints to intervene for them, to the Lord our God, so that he helps them through their poverty and through sickness. Those are the most important things. Those festivals should be passed on to other generations. I'm so glad that Pennsylvania and Scranton and those areas are doing that. We don't get that everywhere in Italian communities. Now I keep in contact with some of my cousins through Facebook and so on. So I'm constantly putting stuff about saints on my Facebook page and talking. And every time there's a festival for a saint in Sicily, you know, my cousins will send oodles of pictures, and they're so beautiful. They're so wonderful, because those saints actually help. You know, when you were on that perilous sea coming from Italy to America, it was horrible. It wasn't easy. And so that praying to those saints was extremely important. So I just wanted to bring that up, because I just feel like those saints are still important. I'm always putting stuff about the saints on Facebook, and I know people think I'm, you know, a little screwy, but it's so important to you know, to recognize that as part of our culture, because it's extremely important part of our culture. And I think it's important to pass it on to our children and our grandchildren.
I agree with you. The first thing that my mother and I did when we bought this house was we put a statue of the Virgin Mary in the backyard. We ended up, it's kind of funny, it's a stone mason in Quakertown, Pennsylvania, called Campagna. They're Italians, of course. And they had this version of the Blessed Virgin Mary holding the baby Jesus that my mother and I were like, this is it. This is the statue. So we drove the 2.5 hours to Quakertown to pick up the statue. We ordered it, and then we drove there to order it, then drove there, like, I think 3 weeks later to pick up the statue. And I remember, like, we tried wrapping her up in like all this like old carpets and things to try to get her back here in one piece, and she made it, thank God. But it was so important to us that the first thing that we did for the house was to have the statue of the Virgin Mary, and we wanted something specific. And we ended up now, we were on a road trip. I had to speak in Boston for something, and we stopped at a Home Goods in Connecticut just for a break on the road. And I see her coming with this shopping cart. I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, it's St. Joseph, and I can't leave him here. So we ended up bringing home a St. Joseph. Then another place we were where we ended up bringing home a St. Francis of Assisi. So, you know, we try to do what we can, even just as a family, to make sure. I mean, the house is filled with statues of saints, but even the yard is. And you see a lot of that out here. You see a lot of, I was walking in Bunker Hill the one day, and someone has a St. Michael the Archangel statue on their front porch, and it's alive and well out here. And we're not the only ones who do that, but I always tell people that story of us with the Virgin Mary, because it's kind of comical. You know, we drove almost to Philadelphia to go and get this because we had to have a certain one.
Those saints perform miracles every day. And our saints in Sicily, San Giuseppe, Santo Nino, Santo Leo, my parents were always celebrating those feast days, because those were important to Sicilians, and they really felt that those saints intervened for them, and that's how they were able to do all the wonderful things that they did, like come to America and own a farm and work in the factories. I mean, those are miracles. Those aren't just everyday, those are miracles, because they were not easy things to accomplish. So I'm so glad that we're keeping the saints alive in our lives. It's extremely important. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. If you ever get a chance, look up St. Anne and the city of Scranton, because St. Anne is credited with saving our city. So there's a basilica in honor of St. Anne in West Scranton, and West Scranton is really where all the coal mining took place, like a lot of it. And where I was talking about the Lackawanna coal mine tour, that's like on the outskirts of West Scranton. So all underneath St. Anne's Hill is completely hollow because it was mines. And in the 1920s, they thought that that entire section of Scranton was just going to collapse into the earth. And St. Anne's Basilica, at the time it was just like a little mission church, was there. So the Passionist priests were praying to her, and she caused a subsidence underneath where this giant boulder basically settled underneath West Scranton, and now nothing is ever going to happen. It's never going to collapse. So she's actually the patron saint of our city for that. And every year in July, you go to St. Anne's Basilica, or if you're not able to get to the Basilica, like because of COVID, you're watching it on TV. It's just like a veneration that everybody from this area really has. That's our next yard statue too, if we can find a St. Anne.
Any last question, and then we'll close.
Yeah, I have a question. Are there records any place of the names of the Italians who worked in the mines in Pennsylvania?
That's problematic. A lot of times the coal mining companies did not keep records. Some of them did, some of them did not. You're not the first person who has asked me this question. I actually did an internship when I was in college for the Pennsylvania Anthracite Heritage Museum. And some areas they have records, some areas they don't. And it seems like with the ethnicities that were further away from Anglo-Saxon, or like they seem to have them for the Germans, the Irish, the Welsh, but then you're going into Polish, Italian, Slavic, you don't have as many records and you don't really have much. It's terrible because I would love to help people. A lot of people have asked me for help genealogically in this area, and that's the one area that it's like, we could try, but I can't guarantee it.
Yeah, I had heard that my grandfather had worked in Pennsylvania in the mines and then came to Illinois and worked as a miner. And interestingly, he was also a shoemaker.
Oh, wow. Oh, I love it when you hear
There's
these
a couple
stories.
questions in the chat, Stephanie.
Yeah.
You have a
Oh,
moment.
I see them. Okay, so Jason, you asked me about, are you thinking Pre-8 Winery in Old Forge?
Yes.
Okay, so the Pre-8 Winery actually went out of business a couple of years back, but we do have several wineries in this region, and when they have their winter season, what they do is they actually get the grapes shipped in from warmer climates. So they have the grapes that grow like during the growing season out here, and then they have them shipped in from California or other places. It depends on the winery themselves. Some of them even get them shipped in from Italy, as far as I know. But unfortunately, yeah, Pre-8 went out of business from what I understand. Although I heard that they might be coming back. And Maria Rosaria, you asked, are there any Italian radio stations in Lackawanna County and Dunmore to keep the Italian community together and to give support? No, unfortunately. There was an Italian radio station in the 1940s through the 1960s that was run by the Fiorani family, except unfortunately that is now defunct. A lot of our radio stations in this area just kind of like focus on like talk radio, like top 40. There's an oldie station out of Tunkhannock. That's kind of like what I end up listening to because I don't like some of the more modern stuff. Really not much ethnically, although one of the local radio stations on Sunday mornings does a polka party. So from 9 until 11, if you turn it on, and I have to watch myself because I can only take like maybe 10 minutes of it. And then it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. It's all polka music for those 2 hours. So we do have it for the Polish community.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, we'll close. It was very stimulating afternoon. And we want to thank you, Stephanie. And we're certainly impressed by the Italianness of Northeastern Pennsylvania. And we'll keep that in mind always now. And do you want to summarize in 25 words or less? A parting shot?
Me trying to do something in 25 words or less is almost impossible. But if any of you ever want to stay in touch, feel free friend me on Facebook or find me on any social media. I love connecting with people. I love hearing about other Italian areas. Do you ever have suggestions for something for the Italian American podcast? I'm your girl. Send it my way. I love getting those. And just really, I like staying in touch with other Italian Americans because I learn from you just as much as hopefully you have learned from me today. So please stay in touch. If you're ever out in this area, let me know. I will take you on a great tour. So, and Dominic, I can't thank you enough. You've been such a mentor and a friend to me my whole life. This was awesome.
Thank you very much. You turned out to be very well.
Good. I'm glad we had that conversation 20 years ago.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bravo,
you.
Steph.